All right, are you ready? Let's talk about plot. This is part of our series on how to read the Bible as literature. We've talked about character. We'll talk about setting along the way. And in this video, we want to talk about the plot, how it's put together, how the story moves along, what stands in the way of it, and what we are to get out of it. So that's our plot structure. So these are the elements that we have in biblical narrative. And we'll take some of them each in turn, and they get their own videos. And this one, of course, is talking about plot structure. So a plot is a sequence of related events identified as a single storyline. So the whole storyline is one story, and the whole sequence of events in that story is the plot from beginning to end. So there we are. Along the way, there are conflicts in our plot. Sometimes they are character conflict, which means there's a good guy and a bad guy, or there's conflict between the characters in our story, and that will drive the plot. Sometimes there's conflict with one's environment, like if you were making a movie about the destruction at Pompeii, you would see many heroic things happening as they struggle against the environment. Sometimes you'll see a story in conflict with supernatural beings. And then finally there is conflict sometimes inside of the character themselves. Think Hamlet, to be or not to be. That is the question. So those are different ways in which the plot can be defined, can be charted out, and where the conflict in the plot will arise. The plot will have a particular shape to it, and these are some of the elements. Sometimes they're made more of than other times, but these are the elements that are usually there. It will start out with some sort of exposition to give you a sense of where you are and what's happening. So that's if it can be as simple as a phrase like "now one day" or "once upon a time," the exposition, the beginning of our plot. And then there will be some issue, some conflict, some incitement at the very beginning that brings the particular plot we're reading about into being, the problem. And then there will be rising action with foreshadowing, suspense, and a surprise, sometimes a reversal of fortune, all of which are serving to propel the plot on. So check out each one of those in turn. There could be an interesting omen. There could be a testing that is coming, but there will come a time when it seems like there is a turning point and we are now able to begin moving toward the climax. There may be further complication, but the climax is the high point of the story when the action finally happens in which the situation, the incitement from before, when that is finally resolved. And then there is what's called a denouement at the end, which helps to explain some of the more details. It wraps up all the little pieces of the plot. Surprises me sometimes when I'm watching a movie that I know is fictional, and then at the end, in the denouement, they are scrolling what happened to those characters after the story that I just watched, knowing full well that those characters were fictional, and so is what's coming next in the denouement. So there you are. But that's plot shape, and these are the basic elements in that shape. Sometimes the plot will contain irony. It's a discrepancy between two things. Check out our figures of speech discussion in poetry about irony. But the idea is sometimes there will be verbal irony. Somebody will say something that the reader knows he doesn't know the full import of what he's saying, but when he says it, it is just ironic that you're pretty sure as a reader that's the direction that the plot is taking. There will be irony of situation in which a king, let's say, what was the king, early English king, that for a time walked about as a peasant, and when he was restored to the throne, went back and rewarded those who took him in. irony of situation, or dramatic irony, all of which could be a part of the plot of your story. The denouement, then, is the area in which we retell the story. We recapitulate the main action. We might summarize the immediate results of our story, or perhaps the long-term effects. We might recount the later fortunes of our characters. Or there might be an echo or reminder of what happened earlier, or a physical departure of one or more of the characters. So let's take, I think I used this illustration in the last episode as well, let's look at the story of David and Abigail and Nabal. If we were talking about denouement, we would talk about what happened to Nabal then, after the crisis of his household was averted. He hears the story and he keels over dead. So we might have that. There's also a sense in which David hears of Nabal's death and sends for Abigail as his wife, and you see Abigail and her handmaids scurry about ready to prepare herself for becoming the wife of the king. So we see some of those immediate results of the story and the fortunes of what comes later. So there we are with denouement. Sometimes we'll be looking at the plot structure of what we might call hero stories, in which we watch the traits of the hero capture our imagination. We see the struggles and conflicts that make him who he is, and the actions that constitute heroic action, and then what the story affirms about your person. And of course, the hero stories that we love more than anything are the stories that we find in the Gospels. So check that out. All right, we will talk again soon. As our next episode, we'll talk about how setting impacts the narrative. Talk to you soon.